All right. Plugged in media. We are here with our agents lounge. We have Emily Staker and Dwayne Treece, two NFL agents, and that are wonderfully respected in their fields. I want to give each of you the opportunity to go ahead and give a brief introduction of yourself, and then we'll go ahead and get into it. Emily, you go first, please.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. I'm super excited to have this discussion tonight. A lot of relevant, timely topics to discuss tonight. But I went to undergrad at Gonzaga University, not known for college football, but definitely the basketball. And then I went to law school at Denver Law, graduated and started working for a boutique agency called Summit Athletes, and I've been with them for the last several years since I got certified. We're definitely like a medium-sized firm and definitely focus more on just having those close relationships with our guys. But I run all of our kind of NIL operations. I did all of the marketing and sponsorship for our guys before NIL really was a thing. And so once it became legalized, essentially, I just tried to jump all over it as best as I could. But I'm also a practicing attorney here in Washington, and I work with a lot of the universities here and in the Northwest in terms of working with their collectives to set up deals in a way that benefit their players tax-wise and just make sure that the guys are protected legally. So that's been an interesting new venture, and I'm sure we'll touch on it a little bit, but I'm always learning new things from the players and the schools, and it's been kind of the Wild West these days in NIL.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Dwayne, your turn, brother.
Hello, Dwayne Treece. I'm a NFL agent, of course. Non-practicing attorney, graduate of Tulane Law. Just like the Ohio State guys like to come on and say the Ohio State is the Tulane University, which is the arguably number one sports law program in the country. We had to say it because other than that, you don't necessarily get the respect for what it is and what that program actually does. I I have a unique practice. Of course, we work within the league, but we also work the other leagues, what's now the UFL, CFL, the ELF, and just kind of understanding kind of the dichotomy between those. And then we also work the transfer portals and work with the consortia as far as new preps coming in or young guys that are making a transition. Just handling those negotiations. My role outside of being an attorney, I work with some of the leagues, abroad. I work with players domestically, and so I have a very unique practice, but it's all the same as representing important people and people and entities and helping them to kind of move forward in their trajectory.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the first topic we want is the NIL. And how do we feel? How do each of you respectively feel that the NIL is either helped or hurt college players in their journey to becoming NFL players? Emily, we'll start with you.
Yeah. I think that it's allowed them to be more thoughtful as far as timing goes. This year was a record low amount of juniors who entered the draft. And that benefits a lot of the guys who did enter the draft and did declare. But again, it just allows them, I think, to develop more in college if that's what they want to do while also getting paid to do it. That being said, is it right for everyone? Not necessarily. It definitely is a case by case thing. I think that's why it's a difficult conversation to talk about because it's nuanced, right? And the guys who are really the top earners for NIL, that's a small few, and NIL money for the most part is never truly going to compete with NFL money, right? An NFL rookie minimum salary is about $1 million this year. And so when you're stacking NIL deals compared to that, there's a very small percentage of college players who are truly going to be able to capitalize on that at the same level that they would if they were to enter the league, right? And so I think just having those kind of nuanced conversations with guys of like, where are you at? What is your true market value? Is it going to be worthwhile? Would you benefit from staying and developing another year? Did you put up good film in the last year? And really just having those discussions specific to the player is super important, and I will just say I always am in favor of guys getting paid, work really hard and they risk injury. And it is a full-time job. So I'm definitely in favor of it. But, I do think that it allows for them to just be a lot more thoughtful as far as timing, which is great.
Okay, thank you. Dwayne, what's your perspective, bro?
I mean, it's NIL, so of course it's a double-edged sword. It's got a gift that comes along with it and a curse. I just kind of like to reiterate some of the things that Emily said. Is like, yeah, if on paper it combats the rookie scale, and so for the top guys, they can make apples to apples. The money of it all is that they can forego that jumping in early, and it does provide that financial security. Um, that they're looking for, but maybe they're not necessarily ready. And then when we look in the context of the COVID year, or all the other things where guys are older coming out now, whatever, and that you see, what was the USFL, XFL merging to the USFL, you find that the guys have more mature bodies. And so sometimes in many ways, waiting an extra year is a good is just a solid decision. If you do NIL right, which is the part of the double-edged sword, it provides the increased visibility. You got some negotiating power. I love to be able to have that with guys to go back and say, what can we see? What can we do? But then actual brand building, before you actually become a professional and associate yourself to a new culture and a new city and a new system, you get to build a little longer on who you were, which is useful. Sometimes you may be the biggest guy in college and you can't really take so much. And so if they've done a good job about brand building up into that point, it's not a bad thing if you don't take in Green Bay, but you can always come back to Columbus.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Great insight. So for the next one, we'll start with you, Dwayne. What do you feel that you've seen as some of the biggest misconceptions that college players have, or draftees, I should say, have about, when they get to the next level in the NFL, some of the biggest misconceptions or misunderstandings they have about what the NFL is really about?
I mean, it sounds really cliche, but it's a business. And so I think maybe I did tune in yesterday or whatever. And so the difference is that, okay, maybe you can lose your job in the portal, season to season, but the NFL, the college football is a microcosm of the NFL. So maybe I don't know if Coach Rista said it, but, somebody's looking to take your job every week. And so, it just that is that much more amplified, and young men transitioning into dealing with an environment where there's much older men or men with children and, all those other things or whatever. I just don't think they really have a concept of that piece of it. And so, it does turn the heat up, on that burner just that much more. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Emily, what's your perspective?
Yeah, so while I was in law school, I worked with a program that actually helped a lot of the teams develop their rookie mini camps. And so we got to kind of plan how they were going to coach up these kids. When they come in, right, this is all the drafted guys and the undrafted guys. They're practicing at 6, 7 in the morning, and then they're doing educational things, financial literacy, media training, and so you get to really see what the teams expect of one of their players, right? And it is this well-rounded person, this professional who has media literacy, who isn't going to be a risk on social media. There's high expectations that aren't necessarily going to be there depending on the program, right? And I will say there's a lot of college programs these days who do a great job of modeling their expectations in the same way that the NFL teams do, and that's a huge advantage. And so when guys have that media training, they understand, what to post and what to not post on social media. That's a huge advantage, right? But I think the biggest misconception from players is just it may be football, but it's a different game, completely different pace, completely different physicality. There's different rules. The personalities are always going to be amplified because it's the best of the best. The competition's going to be amplified. So you may know the game, but you might not know the NFL, right? And so getting to the NFL is just a completely new process. No matter if you're a first-round pick or an undrafted guy, there's going to be growing pains. And so I think that prepping kids for that adjustment is huge, and making sure that they expect to learn, right? And they're not going to go in and know everything on day one, even though they've been playing football their whole life. I think that that is one of the biggest challenges in getting them truly NFL ready.
Awesome. Great information. For the next one, we'll keep it with you, Emily. In your perspective, what do you feel are some of the most common mistakes you see newly drafted NFL players and rookie players making as they enter the NFL?
Yeah, I think the biggest one that I see that's understandable with young men is financially, right? Like they get in, let's say you're a sixth or seventh rounder, right? And you feel like, hey, the team used draft capital on me, so I'm good, right? And I got paid, I got a nice signing bonus. Now I'm in camp and they signed a free agent who's pretty good at my position. And, the competition's getting a little fierce. And the financial security aspect isn't quite there in the way that you thought it was. And maybe you bought a new car when you got drafted, right? So I think that mindset of having, playing it safe financially is really important for young players, especially like, yes, when you're a first rounder, typically, you're going to be given a few chances to really thrive. But for the most part, no one's safe, right? It's like Dwayne said, the competition's always going to be there. And I think making sure that they understand financially, you need to really stretch your money when you're on your first contract and be smart, and don't try and look around at the veterans who are on their second and third contracts and the cars they're driving and where they're living and the watches they've got. Like, you don't try and compete. It's not a competition on who can spend the most money. And I think that I oftentimes see rookies just like get in that mindset where they want to feel like they've arrived in the league. And I think it's really hard to just get them to sit back and just wait till you get to the second contract until you really start to get into that type of thing. But other than that, I would just say the mentality of always showing up every single day, being a true competitor, like that's uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable to go in every single day knowing that you could lose your job. And yet you kind of have to have that mindset and have that edge when you're a rookie, because it's true. There's always going to be a really talented free agent, a really talented veteran who wants that job just as much as you. And so you got to be willing to fight for it.
Great information. Wayne, what's your perspective?
Very, very much similar. I like to think about it being primarily in two different buckets, kind of getting up to speed of what the pro level is. Again, that microcosm thing, transferring over from what you know to what you need to know, and then kind of setting a level or balanced level of being a professional. And so sometimes coming in, that could be overconfidence. But then, you get in there and you got your money and you're neglecting your off-field, the balance, of neglecting your off-field, issues, or, similar thing as a freshman coming in, poor time management, but you got more things to manage, understandably. Ignoring mental health, that's a big thing here and now. You just don't have the same support system, especially to some of the guys that come from the larger systems, the larger, more Power Five schools, that there's, really genuinely a schedule, a program, a system built around you. And this is your adult job. And so at that level, it is the LeBron approach of how to establish longevity, how to put your cook or your massage therapist. What does your team look like? That also probably leads to another thing is what team did you bring? And are those people that are likely the people that you need to have around you in this concentric circle of what success looks like?
Fantastic. For the next one, we'll go to Dwayne. What advice would you give a potential draftee who's not as high on the draft stock as they would like to be, to help increase their draft stock? Like, what kind of things can they do? Should they do? Should they be focused on about helping increase their draft stock as they get closer to the draft?
That's such a wide universe, because I mean, honestly, I was just speaking to a parent, a college parent, and you don't know what you don't know every step along the way of this process. And so you might knock it out the park if you have a younger child that happens to be, a professional, and that might be like a Linda Fajoko. If you got brothers in the league, whatever, then you're ready as a professional, the second time around, as a parent, as an athlete, because you have that thing to draw off of. The biggest thing I say is to put yourself around good people. People that you can trust, people that are knowledgeable, people that have been there before, so they can actually feed you that information, because it's just such an ominous thing of every step along the way. There's a new battle, a new challenge, a new unknown. Um, so get yourself a good agent. Maybe that's a good time to make a plug.
Yeah, one of you two.
Absolutely. In this process, though, I think that on the playing side, outside of the personal side, I really think that position coaches make the difference. Getting up to speed with what professionalism looks like. You can luck out if you're at a good program, if you haven't transferred, a million times, or if your coach hasn't left and they're not in the hot seat based off of just the economics of sport. There's a number of ways that you can kind of fall through the cracks, or that you can survive and be seen for your athleticism, your talent, and having good tape, but still not be ready for the professional experience. And so having a position coach that you're working with that gets you up to speed, that helps you to translate apples to oranges, whether that is the aggression, the athleticism, that is the chalk talk, getting into camp and understanding what the concepts are, those are the things that are so invaluable to making the world stand still, or even just slow down a little bit, that you're not an alien in this new environment when you get there. I love to be around good, solid position coaches.
Excellent. Emily, your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can, you try and have this conversation really the summer before their last season, because that last season is so important. And the reason why is so much of a prospect's grade comes down to his film, and really what's considered like their 2 best game films is a huge criteria for the area scout that's scouting them, and then obviously the director of scouting for that particular team. They write a report and make a grade on each player, and they do that based on usually what they would consider a player's 2 best game films against their 2 best opponents. And that's the way that the league has been grading players for decades, and they still do it because it works. Film is like 80% of what your grade is, right? Testing's super important, especially if you do become a combine invitee. That's huge. But really your film is critical. So when you're going into your last season, you just need to be locked in, and you got to put all the outside noise away about getting to the NFL. Like, I know it seems counterintuitive, but if you want to really give yourself the best shot at getting to the NFL, you got to do away with all the distractions and be really present in the moment in your college career. Go out on a high note, and like Dwayne said, like, be really intentional with the people that you surround yourself with. Make sure that they're all bought in on your goals too, and really bought in, just supporting you throughout that, shutting out all the noise, and just continuing to work at it. And again, if you are talking to agents or working with agents, you want to make sure you're trying to get feedback from scouts. Hey, is there anything that I could improve on throughout the season? And then of course, once you come out, the film's done. So if you do work with an agent, you want to make sure your agent is sending out your 2 best game films to everybody, right? And making sure that you are getting a chance at a fair grade and evaluation. Because if an area scout went to your school in September and you played your best games in November, then they might not see it. So you want to make sure that you have an agent who's being diligent and really sending out your best tape so that you're going to get your best grade. And then just being locked in. If you are going to the combine, great. If you're just betting on your pro day, that's fine too. But I think it's kind of a weird adjustment period for a lot of guys, because they, for the most part, they're done with school and they have all this free time. They've never had this much free time in years. And a lot of them fall victim to overtraining, because they just don't know how else to fill their time. But I really think it's a great opportunity to work on your mental health, to work on your mindset, to really get right with yourself, to get the right mentality for camp and just for your rookie season. It's the hardest year of your life. It really is. You're kind of constantly in that fight or flight. So taking this time right now to really, work on your ability to handle adversity and your ability to have comfort in the discomfort is so important. So, I mean, you got to play the long game. with this kind of thing, and it sucks, but you got to be intentional if this is really your dream. And it does come down so much to just being locked in those college games and putting out good film.
Excellent. Free game for all you players out there. I hope y'all taking notes. So staying in that same lane, Emily, what advice would you give to a draftee to prevent them from their draft stock declining? Like, what type of things should they avoid, not make sure they're doing, or doing to make sure that they don't decline their draft stock?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think a lot of guys really get in their head. If you don't know how you're being evaluated, it's really easy to kind of psych yourself out, right? And try and overthink it. And so I do think a lot of guys overthink kind of the intangibles, right? And testing is super important, but the purpose of testing is really to confirm what scouts already think about you, and if you blow it out of the water, that's a different story. But for the most part, you just want to be hitting all the right metrics to confirm what they have already seen on film. And so I think, when it comes to the board stuff, like, of course you want to be prepared. And for the most part, in my experience, your school coach, your university coaches, your position coach will work with you to really prepare for all the interview process, to make sure that you are dialed in, locked in. But, just be authentic to yourself. Don't try and be something you're not. If you're wasting energy trying to act a certain way, it's going to be a distraction. At the end of the day, if you're a good player, you got to be willing to bet on yourself, bet on your game, have faith that you put good tape up for that season, and then just kind of channel all your focus and energy on your testing, on those interviews, on making those good connections with the teams that are reaching out to you to talk, and trusting that if you do hire an agent, that your agent's doing good work for you too behind the scenes.
Great. Dwayne, your perspective on that?
Yeah. The short answer of how to avoid is to make good decisions. That's a loaded answer because what does it mean to make good decisions? That may be injury management. That may be I don't know, reduce the off-field issues. It can be consistent. At the end of the day, the things I like to stick to as far as getting past that being loaded of being consistent is be coachable and don't necessarily smell yourself too much, especially if you have a high draft grade. The biggest thing that we like to have guys go about doing is when it comes to having that level of humility, being coachable, is that hey, if you are, then you're listening to if you put the right people around you, then you're actually heeding their warnings and listening to them about what they know and what you don't. That's a big, huge thing because, hey, getting into an interview, you may be asked certain things, but if you've been listening the whole entire time of what your team has been saying, then it doesn't just necessarily answer questions that the scouts may have for you, but it also, you've come through a process. So, I've got the defensive end. He's got a strong first move, may not have a predictable second move and may not be able to really get to the quarterback like they think he should. They're drafting him off of traits, the 7th round or a priority free agent. And so those type of things, when you're on the bubble, being self-aware doesn't necessarily have to tell a scout they're wrong, but you've gone through this process and these are the things I've been working with my trainer, and my trainer has shown me this, and these are the things we tell. And so then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that, hey, I recognize the things that you're saying that are not so great about me. These are the things I've been doing in the interim. You don't have to necessarily be wrong about me, but you should likely take another look. And so at that place in space, we can reconcile the things that we disagree about, but at the same time, what it also puts you in a place that you're having an intelligent conversation as a young man, as a young athlete with your professional organization in this job interview. And then at that place, it makes you that much more mature. It makes you that much more, appear to be that much more of a professional at the entry point of your career. And they can likely look at you that as you go forward, you're going to do the right things because you see yourself, objectively, and you're still moving forward beyond criticism, and embracing it. If that could be a proper example.
Excellent. So as we continue on, what would you? We'll start with you, Dwayne. In your experience, what have you seen that are some disqualifiers for NFL teams that allow players who would have assumed they would have been drafted second, third round, or what have you, that ultimately go undrafted and become free agents? Like, what are some of those disqualifiers that NFL teams have that are not kind of like non-negotiables for some players?
I mean, it's similar to probably the previous response. It's character, it's consistency. You know, it's off the field issues. It's tape that doesn't look the same every time you look at it. You see a different person, and so sometimes, you know, for the guys that are projected to be higher, they just simply don't have those things. You can bet on them. The guys that don't, they're betting that you have the basics that are what's needed, maybe height, weight, speed, and then they're hoping that maybe there's some things that they can coach into you. And so, you know, that reigns supreme, whether it's college or professional. You know, it just has there's a bigger circumstance at stake, is that you don't get to go to the next level if you don't show and prove these basic things.
Got it. Emily, your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we always tell our guys, your talent might get you in the door, but it's your character that keeps you there, right? So just to echo exactly what Dwayne said, it really comes down to coachability too. I can't tell you how many times I've witnessed a player either rapidly improve or decrease his draft stock because when teams have their local days or they want a private workout with a player, they oftentimes are having the position coach that would be working with him, you know, training him, having him do those drills. And that person is really going to have a huge say in whether or not they draft him, right? If that position coach really wants to work with that player, if they had a great, you know, day together and that kid was coachable and he already was improving based on the feedback from that coach is going to stand on the table for him come draft day. You know, position coaches want the guys that they like. If they know that they can coach this guy, that's going to be a huge difference maker come draft day. Conversely, if the kid's not taking good feedback, if he's not dialed in, you know, not coachable, if it's sloppy, and all the little intangible things, you know, if there's any kind of air of ego or anything like that, that can really put off a lot of coaches. So I really think at the end of the day, if they're evaluated as being truly coachable and an asset beyond the talent, you know, I think that is a huge advantage. But just really putting in the effort to make sure that you are a truly well-rounded player is so important.
Excellent, thank you. So we'll keep it with you, Emily. And this is a hot one. So this is a hot take we're about to have here. We hear a lot about this Wonderlic test, right? It's been talked about draft after draft after draft. In your honest opinion, this is a two-part question. Do you feel that the Wonderlic test is fair, or do you feel it is biased? And then the second part of the question is, how much weight do these NFL teams really put into that Wonderlic test?
Yeah. Fairness wise, you know, I don't know. It was written by one or two people, right? It was created by people, so of course it's subjective, right? And so my thought on any of these tests, because now there's so many, especially at a skill position or like quarterbacks, they have all these cognitive tests now. My thought on it is if the team really is giving it that much stock, more so than film evaluation, then they've got issues on their side, right? That's not a shortcoming on the player side. If a team doesn't know how to truly scout and trust their scouting personnel, that's a them issue. You know, they shouldn't be giving these tests that much credence. I think that if you're really splitting hairs between two players, it can have some value, but I just feel like if you are completely relying on a Wonderlic result or, you know, anything like that, that's your decision maker, then your scouting staff failed you. You know, you should have real on the field reasons for why you're taking this guy. And if you can't come up with that and you're relying on, you know, a score, that's your decision, right? And we saw that with CJ Stroud. We saw that what happened, and you know they're kicking us. I mean, no disrespect to Bryce Young whatsoever, but CJ Stroud had a historic rookie year, and because of that one test result, the Panthers kind of balked at him, and that's on them, and they got to own that, right? And I know that there's some feelings there, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't have given that test as much credence as we did. So, I think it also really is position specific. Like, there's a lot of positions that it's just not going to come into play as much as it does. Quarterback, super important. Offensive lineman, super important, right? Anything that does kind of require that high level intellectual requirement, it has more importance. But at the end of the day, it's one factor, but it should never be the factor. And if a team is relying on that, then again, I just tell our guys that's their issue. That's not your issue.
Got it. Thank you. Dwayne, what are your thoughts on that, brother?
Yeah, I agree. It should never be the factor. But quite honestly, I like the Wonder Lake. I mean, even though teams are moving, to S2, I don't really know too much about that. If you really kind of delve down to people trying to crunch all these numbers and get all these information on all these players, and it's still a fallible, failed system, what would you put in its place that would quantify how well a player that comes from college and translates their mental ability to grasp a playbook from college to the pro level, or let's say a guy gets traded whatever in the middle of the season and they got to go to a new team. Wonderlic, all these questions of time, apples are to oranges as tables are to chairs. That's really what they're trying to measure, and how well you process and how well you assimilate the knowledge that you have to the knowledge that you need to gain. And so I think it is I think it is a good measure, maybe not a great measure. I think that a lot of times, whether it's agencies or whatever, a lot of people don't pay it much attention. It's low hanging fruit to me. Like, if we have someone that is getting in that place in space, why not take, it's not even a week worth of training. It's 2 days or 3 days, and just let them feel comfortable with it. It's almost like a brain game. I don't think it's things that the guys that hold these positions where it's really important, that there's something that they shouldn't be able to overcome or accomplish for the weight of the things that they're trying to actually come into. So I just don't think that a lot of times people pay it too much attention, and then when the scores don't pan all the way out, it's a gripe, but it's not. I don't think Wonderlic is too heavy of a hurdle, especially for the high position players to really show out at.
Okay, fair enough. Appreciate that. I'm coming right back at you, Dwayne. Without naming a player, without naming the team, what has been one of the most craziest stories you've heard from a draftee, from what a team has asked them during the combine?
Yeah, so I feel like and have heard that teams are kind of backing away from that guerrilla style interrogation tactic. I think a lot of times it's been, opportunity for younger scouts to show how much or how well they've done their research by digging deep into personal issues. I think probably the most egregious thing I've heard is a parent having, former substance abuse issues and them asking that player. And, those are more trigger sort of things. And so they're them playing not just asking for information and how much this will affect the player and their profession in their life, but also using it as a trigger warning or a triggering sort of scenario to push into how well the player's emotional stability was. And so, and if you can imagine being in that scenario and a player getting that from however many teams that wants to interview them at the combine or whatever, that can kind of turn the tide on what all the things that they've overcome to get to that point, and this being a crowning moment or accomplishing, a mountaintop experience, to being, reverting them back down to a low with not much qualitative data to substantiate going that deep or that far.
Okay, great. Emily, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, very similar. I think it's becoming less and less common, but it can be used if a player in particular maybe has a history of character issues or, has a past. It's probably going to come up. And I will say, I don't think it's about having the right answer. I think it's about having the right response. And those are two different things in terms of the substance of what you're saying and how you're saying it, right? And so a lot of times it is brought up to see, are you going to get riled up? Are you going to get angry? Are you going to engage in that way? Because these conversations happen. Stuff happens in the locker room. Stuff happens with coaches. Like there's some coaches who use that as a motivational tactic. How are you going to respond as a player? It's in the response that they're getting information about you versus the content of it. And I do think for the most part, as long as you're transparent and honest and forthcoming, you're going to be fine, and you're showing progress. Even if you have a past, you're showing progress and you're showing that you're not that person anymore and you're able to, keep your composure. Yeah, I think you're fine. But for the most part, I think teams will shy away from it. I do think they still try and ask just weird questions, again, just to see how a player responds to being uncomfortable. But I don't think they do the kind of interrogation that they did back in the day at the level that they used to. That definitely is becoming less common.
Fair enough. I will stick with you, Emily, on this one. Um, what what advice would you give to draftees who are not going to be highly drafted, as well as current NFL players who are not all pro or Pro Bowl or highly known players around helping them to secure merchandising and endorsement deals? Like, what's the best approach for them to go ahead and secure that?
Yeah. Find a niche, find a niche that's true to you and really run with it. Figure out what it is you like off the field. Figure out who it is that you are and work with brands that you use every day. I have offensive linemen who live in North Dakota who we do deals with, like Caterpillar, you know what I mean? Like they do tractor commercials, right? And they love it because they got free tractors and it's the most offensive lineman thing ever, but it's true to them and the companies want to do it because the guys actually use that stuff. So I think just figuring out what it is you actually like, who it is that you want to be, to your fans and really taking that money with it, because really so much of athlete marketing these days takes place on social media, and so much social media marketing relies on what's considered like organic engagement, right? And that means it's not just like this random, it feels like a billboard ad on your feed, right? Where it's like that a player promoting something that you're pretty confident he's never used before in his life. He has no idea what product he's even talking about, right? That usually doesn't have a lot of success for the brand. But when a player is saying, I use this every day, like this makes me a better player, this is how I enjoy my free time, that has a lot greater value to the brand. And so I think leaning into that organic content, leaning into what's authentic to you as a person is huge. When you might not necessarily have like the household name, you're still going to have value to brands when you're actually using their stuff and when you actually, it's true to you, so just honing in on what that identity is and what brands you would actually work with is huge.
Dwayne, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, very, very, very similar. In a previous life, before I was an agent, I got to, I lived in Italy, France, Switzerland, and I got to work with a lot of luxury goods, the Gucci's, the Lamborghinis, the Ducatis, and Bulgaris, and the like. And I think when you look at celebrity is the luxury goods of personal branding. And so, what I tell my NIO, my college guys more than anything is, you build your brand by being authentic. Your brand is not your logo. Your brand is your story. And so people aren't necessarily connecting to good products and all these other things or whatever. They're connecting to your story first, and then those things kind of flow outside of it. When you look at the numbers when it comes down to NFL marketing, less than 3% of players really get significant deals. 7 of the top 10 earners are quarterbacks, and of those top 10 earners, the money really equates to only about 12% of their actual earnings. So for most guys that are actually in the league, the money that they're earning is contract related money. If you really want to get down to the marketing, you have to establish that story. Sometimes it's social media and the posting and all these other things, but it's really an effort in storytelling. And so yeah, the authenticity is connected to the things that you actually like, the things that you actually participate in, because by connecting with the things that are actually connected to you, they are helping you to tell your story. That by the time you end up coming out of professionalism, that ends up being, you put you in a place where that's the long game, the brands that stick, or the brands that you can stick to, or the things that you can have equity in. It just makes perfect sense. Without that, you start to connect yourself to a lot of things, and getting to the money, as people say, it's really, really short game. The deals and the transactions are really small. They're really short. They don't really pay off in the end for what they are. And at the end of the day, the public doesn't know who you are. You're just a piece of Velcro that people have kind of, stuck themselves to. A sticker, we used to call it sticker bush. Uh, they all the little birds just get stuck to you, and you'll find yourself pulling them off, but there's no real value to it. It's more of a waste of time than anything.
Right. Appreciate that. I'm gonna get you guys out of here on this last question. We're going to start with you, Emily. Um, what advice would you give to any players that are watching this live stream, or that will rewatch it later on YouTube, about how to maximize their draft potential and not hurt themselves, and then also make sure you let everyone know how they can contact you if they need an agent?
Yeah, I know I touched a little bit on it about film, but I also want to hit on something that Dwayne had said about surrounding yourself with the right people. It is always really upsetting to me when I see a very talented player surround himself with what I call like yes men, and people who are just going to tell you what you want to hear because they want a part of your future. You know what I mean? And they feel bought into your success, but for the wrong reasons. And so I think being really intentional about who you surround yourself with is so, so critical. That's going to matter in college. It's going to matter in the NFL. It's going to matter when you retire, right? Like having people that you can really trust who are going to be honest with you every step of the way is so important, because that doesn't just make you the best player, but that makes you the best person. That makes you the best husband. That makes you the best dad. That makes you the best teammate. Having people that are really going to be there for you through the highs and lows is so important. So having that support system, whether it's your family, whether it's your teammates in college or the coaching staff, just like really making sure that you have a circle of confidence that you can trust, because there's so many critical decisions that have to be made, and you're going to want to talk about it with somebody. So just, really surrounding yourself with the right people. And then, aside from that, I would just say, put the blinders on and work as hard as you can, to be dialed in every game, be in the film room. I can't tell you how many times area scout has said, oh, I stopped by the school and your guy was in the film room and I actually got to talk to him. Like when you're in the film room, oftentimes you will run into scouts, and so work hard, right? And put in the effort to become the best you can be. Don't coast. I can't tell you, I have never, ever in my years of doing this met a player who regretted working hard. You never look in hindsight and think, oh, I'm so glad that I was so relaxed during my last year of college ball, right? Like you're never going to regret giving it your everything. It's always the opposite. So, commit to it as a full-time job, because it's about to be, if you really want to be a professional. So you got to start living that if you want that to be a reality.
Awesome. How does any player that may not have an agent reach out to you? How do they contact you?
Yeah. So I'm on all social media. It's just Emily Staker, Staker, and then we have a website. It's thesummitathletes.com.
Excellent. Thank you. Dwayne, your turn, brother.
Yeah, I mean, I think Emily was spot on. I think that at the end of the day, it's professionalism, and it's hard to turn on at a very high level if you haven't practiced it the whole way along the road. That is the consistency. It is humility. It's a process and self-awareness. It's being able to be coachable, to receive criticism, but to also to treat criticism, as a benefit, that somebody's letting you know the things that you don't know, and leveraging that to be better in places that you probably wouldn't have gotten on your own. Aside from that humility, having a good team. is great. I just be careful to caution in the age of NIL to associate a good team with somebody dropping a check into your bank account. I always tell players, if you can be bought, you can be sold. And generally speaking, when you look at, kind of some of the deals that are going on around, whether they're clandestine or they're above ground or whether they're below ground, and however, people play this game, it is a long game. If it is your brand, then it's not just deals. If there are deals, then are not, you should likely be doing an exclusive deal with someone that's watching all the paperwork that's coming, that's watching all the brands that are attaching themselves. So you can actually have a cohesive strategy from where you are to where you're going, in your image of how the world sees you. Separately, maybe quite likely, within our team, we employ a PR manager, very early and often. We don't just jump and manage guys with the portal and things like that as a money grab. We start to kind of school them on the things of football, the business of football, like what's coming next, and what should they be looking for, how to prepare in this next stage in development before the next wave of scouts come and take this next tranche of information before they digest it. You be ready and be prepared, and so your film looks better and your consistency is a lot stronger. And so having a great team is awesome. You should vet your team. And I know it's hard for some guys because they have responsibilities and other things that pull them from left to right. But making those solid and sound decisions and with the end road in mind is absolutely the most important thing. You cannot make a long-term decision in a short-term position. And so, every step along the way, take a step back and look at the field for what it is. And at every step along the way, if you can, have somebody that can see the field for you or see the areas of the field where you can.
Excellent. Thank you. And for those players that reach out to you.
Sure. So I mean, I'm on here. I'm on Twitter Space, Twitter X. I'm sorry. But I'm also, reachable via IG. Agent Dwayne Treece. It's right here in my tab right here. Separately from that, we've got our website, QSE Sports. We're quintessentially sports. QSE for short, for everybody that want to say that long name. But we're here. If you want to set up a meeting or you set up a consultation, we get and work with guys early under the auspices of NIL. We have actual NIL work to do, which is brand building, which is learning who our clients are and who they will be. And so we do like this to start that journey early with them. It makes it that much more family when we get to the end goal. So don't feel free to reach out right away. It doesn't necessarily have to be when draft day or time comes, because I would love for people to know what my character is already before I have to be a fifth voice in the room, and you have to kind of get at the end of the road and make a decision like a shot in the dark.
Absolutely. Thank you both. In media, we brought you this round. A lot of great information, a lot of great jewels here for all you players out there. I'm Jay Black, CEO and co-founder of Plugged In Media. I want to thank again Emily Staker and Dwayne Treece for joining us. We appreciate you all for joining in. Appreciate you both for joining us. God bless and have a great weekend.
You as well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take care.